Our news review. Please say we're joined by Julia Davies, a Patriotic Millionaires member and angel investor. Good to see you again. Thank you for coming in. Let's crack on. There's all sorts of a good mix of stories today. Let's start with the front page of the Express. Elderly living in poverty could exceed 2 million, says the paper.
Absolutely, and this is, this is a national shame. So we have, Age UK talking about the fact that we have basically 2 million pensioners that are living in poverty in the 6th richest country in the world. And this all goes to the very heart of the work that we do as Patriotic Millionaires, which is talking about the fact that we need to address the situation that we're now in as a nation. So we live in a country where we have an ageing population, and that's a great thing. We've had fantastic advances in medicine, which means that people can live longer. But that means that we need to be realistic about how we need to run our country and how we need to fund services for that would protect everyone, our elderly, our young. And this situation, unless we address it, is only going to get more problematic. So alongside an ageing population, we have AI coming along, as we all know, we're talking about all of the time. So that means that we're no longer live in a world where we can rely on taxation of work as the primary source of funding for public services, because that's what we're talking about. When we have 2 million pensioners in poverty, that means we're letting them down as a nation, and that means we need to be increasing funding of public services, of health provision, of support for those in society that need it, in particular our elderly. So we can't just rely on business as usual as we have. So as a group, as Patriotic Millionaires, we are making the case we have got to, whether we like it or not, and it's not just about fairness, it's about this is where we are. We have got to be increasing taxation of wealth so that we don't have this very shameful situation. These people have worked hard all their life, they've contributed to our country, we need to look after them.
And the paper, quoting Age UK, says that the OAPs, as it says, are taking drastic measures, taking fewer baths and showers, cutting electricity use, skipping meals, all ways of saving costs. I wrote down as you were talking the phrase respect our elders. I wonder equally if we need a bit of a mindset shift in this country. I think, you look at other nations, they have a much more deference and reverence for people who are older. And sometimes in the UK, it's kind of like, OAPs or kind of our elderly of society. Maybe we need to approach the people that have gone before us in a slightly better way as well, just socially.
Well, I just think overall we need to recognise our responsibility to look after our young and old. That's the basic sort of foundation of a well-functioning society. And I think we're letting down both sides, and we really don't need to do this. But we can continue to do it unless we update our tax system. I mean, just this week, another factor is, like Amazon have just started trialling drone deliveries. I mean, if there's not a clearer indication that jobs are going to be replaced by AI, whatever you want to call it. So we are going to have a situation where we need to look at, what are going to be the jobs of the future. And the jobs of the future could be providing the degree of care that our elderly deserve and the degree of support our young deserve to actually maximise, their potential future. But we can only do that, really, as a society if we're willing to look at properly funding services like that. Because, if we're going to replace these jobs and we're going to continue to have elderly people, living longer, they should have the lives that they deserve to have, having contributed. And, we need to fund all of this. So we need to just get real.
That's the situation with regards to funding people who are kind of pensionable age. There's also going to be the challenge of funding rail infrastructure, potentially, because Northern Powerhouse Rail will finally deliver real change for millions in the north of England. Keir Starmer will announce today £45 billion is being proposed to be spent on new lines between Manchester and the rest of the country, and also upgrades to services in West Yorkshire. And you just think, what about High Speed 2? That ballooned and ballooned and ballooned and still hasn't delivered anything. And I'm sure many people in the north will go, heavens, we remember Rishi Sunak, we remember George Osborne talking about northern powerhouses and northern rail, etc. We remember being on Pacer trains not that long ago that were based on the chassis of an old bus. And we've only just got rid of those and we still don't have anything new to replace it. It's, I'm sure, a great prospect for the north. But surely people up there, I used to live in York, and York's on the front page of the paper, actually. It's a picture of York railway station. Probably going, well, stop talking about it and deliver it.
Well, exactly. And this is about investment again. Investment in what will actually sort of address multiple issues. This is going to allow the north of England to thrive in the way it needs to. And it's also going to allow us to move towards more public transport, because it's not just rail, it's public transport in general that we need to be investing in, because that's going to address multiple issues. And it ties into an issue that, that's very relevant at the moment, because just improving our rail transport network, because, if you ever travel in Europe, which I do, because I've taken lots of trips across Europe on holiday by rail, you notice, how the rail system there, it just seems to work so much better. Very often I've took trips going right across Europe where the only problem I've had has been, either starting my trip in the UK or finishing off in the UK. Because, again, to address issues like climate crisis, we need to be making it affordable for people to make the right choice, because right now it's just not. It's cheaper for people to drive vast distances than get the train. And we need that investment. So, again, it all comes down to investment and where do you get that money from? And we've got to be realistic.
And I think it's also the integration of the transport network. And I think of the village I used to live in North Yorkshire, there's the A64 dual carriageway that runs about 2.5 miles away from the village I grew up in. There's a very frequent bus service, but it's getting there. Well, you could walk, which is going to take you the best part of 45 minutes, or you could jump on your bike, which will take you 5 minutes. But then when you get to the bus stop, there's no bike rack. So you're probably less likely to use the service. You're more likely to jump on the car. And so it's thinking about, do you need to put in 3 bike racks next? And it's a simple metal heap, let's be honest, a bit of concrete. But that would allow people to more adequately and easily get to the bus stop, to then get to the bus, to then get to our high streets as well, and then potentially use less online shop. It's not just travel and transport, but it's then the interconnectivity with the economy as well.
And not just the economy, because this links into one of the other stories in the paper today about, the health benefits of just walking a bit more. But, for walking, you can say cycling. So it's basically the health benefits of walking and cycling. So this is the story that you picked up in...
this is the Times, page 17 of the Times.
Yeah.
And it's... Cut your risk of dying by 15%, not dying, because we're all going to die at some point, but your early risk of dying by 15% by doing a 10-minute stroll.
Yeah.
It's tiny.
Exactly. And, I was just this week re-watching part of the National Emergency Briefing on the climate crisis, and Hugh Montgomery, he's a critical care doctor, and he was talking about how everything that we need to do for the climate crisis, which itself is a great threat to health, is also going to benefit and address many of the other issues that we have. So active travel, so reducing the amount of cars on the road, that's going to address air pollution, but it's also going to help us be fitter, and the cost to the economy of all of the diseases and health problems associated with people not being enough active is vast, So when you put all of these things together, the benefits of making it easier for people to walk and cycle places instead of getting in their car, absolutely vast. So they all, basically layer on top of each other.
And it's remarkable. So it talks about here in this article in the Times, diseases including diabetes, heart disease and cancer are some of the biggest causes of preventable premature deaths linked to sedentary lifestyles. You talk about being an active lifestyle. And so I think there's often a temptation to go, oh, my God, I've got to go to the gym and work out and go crazy. No, says the study, concluded that even an extra 5 minutes a day would reduce the general population's early death rate by 10%. It looked at the impact of moderate to vigorous activity. A walk, mowing the lawn, housework, cycling or swimming. Heavens, I don't enjoy hoovering, but if it means I'm going to live 10% longer, then great, bring on the hoover.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if we can make it pleasanter and easier for people to choose to sort of walk somewhere, get on their bike instead of getting in that car, then that's all going to help, with people choosing to take that step instead, and, with health benefits and also cleaning up our air. So it's pleasanter, because obviously it's not very nice walking in places where you're competing with, traffic that's pumping fumes at you and also just making it quite hazardous to cross the road. So, when we're putting in these measures to make it easier for people to get around, the benefits just all add up. And over time, that just makes it a nicer thing for people to do. So they'll naturally choose to do that. And
if you're a housework that argues over who does the cleaning, just point out to your spouse that you're going to live longer if you do it. It's a simple win. Let's talk about the challenge, heavens, down in the southeast. Southeast Water are really struggling to provide basic services. Absolutely. And this, again, is such a clear illustration of the consequences of not addressing the cause of these problems. So the cause of these problems is basically it's climate crisis plus also not investment in our water services. So we have our water services all owned by these sort of, private companies who for a very long time have prioritised sort of profits
to their owners, and also these vast sort of loan arrangements that they've had, and they've not been investing in services. So this is areas of the country that have gone straight from hosepipe ban to basically water shortages, and that is all through, not making the steps to sort of address the situation that we are now in. So we are now in a situation where we go from periods of drought to periods of excessive rain, and that's then, can coincide with people not having clean water because of the impacts on our reservoirs. And I think one of the stories that's on here really shows about how these issues that we're talking about, they are the economy. So there's a little story in there about a couple. So because of these not having access to water in their area, the mum can't go to work because she can't send her kids to school. So that's one income that's affected there. The dad is a self-employed builder. He needs water to mix cement and do his jobs. So this guy, he's not sitting down and just putting up with that. He's been literally just dragging water up from the local river. But that's obviously, he's not going to be able to work at the level that, he needs to with that. That's not a practical choice. And so that really shows that unless we actually put the investment into addressing the climate crisis and adapting to the situation which is now coming down the road, because we haven't done that, then the costs just absolutely rack up. So when we hear about the stories about how much it's going to cost us to make the transition towards clean energy, those figures just... One, that they don't take into account the costs associated with the status quo, with continuing with fossil fuels, but they also are ignoring the huge costs to us of the problems that are coming, not coming down the line, they are here now. And that illustration of just one couple, what that's costing them now, not having access to water, really clearly shows that is jobs affected, and that's the economy.
And the figures are huge here. So the southeast water leaks, it's 100 million litres a day, which is enough to fill 35 Olympic swimming pools. And again, kind of, you're talking about the individual impact. The paper here, the Daily Express, quoting, one mum of two said this is the third time of having no water for extended periods in 7 months, including 12 days before Christmas. If I didn't laugh, we'd cry. We've ordered a water butt to flush the toilet and several camping showers. The situation is intolerable.
Yep.
Remarkable human impact. There's a couple of other stories to get through. We've got a few minutes to go. Let's talk about The Guardian, page 6 of The Guardian.
Yes, so this is the news that 24 was the third hottest year on record.
25.
25.
We're a year. We're
25.
Slipped into 26.
Sorry.
I've done it about 3 times already this week.
But then 24 was it's not so off, because 24 was the hottest, wasn't it? So that was the hottest year on record. So basically, the Paris Agreement many years ago, we came together as a world, and we recognised that things were going to get really pretty dire if we allowed average temperatures to go above 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. And we're now basically nudging that. We're basically pretty much there. And the consequences of that, again, are across the board. So just one example of how this isn't just something that's going to affect us in the future. Love Island, they had to delay filming because of wildfires in South Africa. But again, so that might seem like, but that's an example of how this affects absolutely everything. So when we have temperatures like this is increasing extreme weather events, and it's increasing wildfires across the board. And a very serious example of that is the amount of forests that are being burned on a daily, monthly, annual basis. So I was reading an article that was saying that we're basically losing, through wildfires, forests the size of England every year. And so,
you struggle to kind of put that into context in your mind, don't you?
It's very difficult. And then, the added consequences of that, because that is basically turning areas that were carbon sinks, basically, into carbon emitters. The health consequences of that aren't just in the areas which are actually suffering the wildfires. The fumes from that are travelling vast distances. So when we had wildfires in Canada, Europe was suffering health problems as a result of the pollution that was then spreading right across the world. So this, again, is showing that if we don't address these issues, the problems mount up.